are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, your host for Locked On Seahawks. Glad to have you listening in for this special Saturday episode. Once again, had to bypass on Blue Friday. A few things came up, but glad to have you listening in. Big game coming up at Lambeau Field tomorrow. Seahawks already in Green Bay, getting ready for this crucial Week 10 matchup featuring Aaron Rodgers going up against Russell Wilson. Both quarterbacks going to be ready to go. I'll be dishing out some keys to victory as well as my picks to click on today's episode, plus my weekly prediction. Are the Seahawks going to get their fourth win, or are they going to continue to struggle at Lambeau Field? Let's get to it. This episode of Locked On Seahawks is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. And thanks for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe. Again, available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, a number of other platforms. 5 podcasts a week, all free. So make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to Locked On Seahawks. Now for your lead story here on Locked On Seahawks. After being designated to return to practice earlier this week, Russell Wilson and D. Eskridge were officially activated to the 53-man roster on Friday, and they will play for the Seahawks on Sunday. That's huge news for Seattle offensively. Obviously, number 3 being back under center is the most important. Neither one of these should be a surprise based on what I was able to observe this week. And again, I only get to see the first few minutes of practice each week. During the regular season, we are limited in the number of minutes that we're allowed to watch. Most of the practice, reporters are not on site able to watch. But the little I was able to view, Russell Wilson looked very comfortable throwing the football, throwing spirals. Didn't get to see any deep balls. There have been some reports that have come out that he was throwing 50, 60-yard bombs with ease. I would not be surprised by that with how comfortable he looked. Looked like he was having the ball roll out of his hands fluidly. Didn't look like he had missed a beat, really, since missing the last 3 games coming off of finger surgery. So would have been stunned if Russell Wilson was not ready to play with the way he's looked and how motivated he is. Just 5 weeks after surgery, he is going to be playing against the Green Bay Packers. So that's a huge boost for Seattle's offense. And getting D. Eskridge back is also a big deal. He looked fluid and in and out of his breaks, was moving really well this week, the couple practices that I was able to observe. So it's good to have him back healthy. He was dealing with vision issues as recently as 2 weeks ago from a severe concussion. So that was looking like a pretty ominous situation, but able to work through that. Pete Carroll has said that he is now past that vision issue. Was practicing all week, looked great. Again, looked outstanding athleticism-wise, was moving really well in and out of his breaks, running fast. So his addition is going to be big for this offense, not just in the passing game, but also his ability to run jet sweeps, get him involved on screens. So we'll see what the game plan is with this being just his second NFL game. He hasn't played since the season opener. We'll see how many reps they give him since he's had this long absence, but sounds like he is going to be part of the game plan there. Looking forward to getting him back out there as a complementary weapon to go with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. So no surprise that those 2 players were activated. They got through the week without a hitch, looked 100% healthy. Russell Wilson said his fingers around 90%, but relatively speaking, he's ready to go. He's ready to play. He's eager to get back on the field and help his team hopefully get a win in Green Bay this weekend. While they're going to get Wilson and Eskridge back, though, I wasn't as surprised about this. Chris Carson, they decided not to activate for this week. Now, Pete Carroll said they're not going back to square one. This wasn't a setback. They just decided he was not ready yet to play in a game. He practiced twice this week on Wednesday and Thursday. They held him out on Friday. He's trying to come back from an undisclosed neck injury. Carroll has not provided specifics on what exactly is going on there, but Carson's been out since the Rams game in week 5. So he'll now miss his 5th consecutive game. Alex Collins was not on the final injury report, so he's going to start his 5th straight game in Carson's place. And Carroll admitted they were able to get some hits on Carson this week. They were able to bang him around a little bit, and he looked good in the 2 practices, but the medical team did not clear him to return to game action, and they just decided that they wanted to make sure that he was fully ready. They didn't feel he was. They thought it was too quick to bring him back only after 2 practices. Again, did not practice on Friday. That makes sense. And I think from a long-term perspective, this is going to continue to be a situation that I'm going to view as a 50-50 proposition week in, week out. And that's how I viewed it this week. I thought he had a 50-50 chance he might be able to play this week. He isn't dealing with discomfort. At least that's what Carroll said at this point. So that's encouraging. But is he going to be able to take hits in an NFL game? Neck injuries are no joke. They are serious regardless of what type of neck injury it is. It might not be the same one Cliff Averill and Cam Chancellor had that ended up ending their career, but it's still a neck injury nonetheless. And so they have to be cautious with this and make sure that he is ready to go. That's what the medical staff is doing. That's what the coaching staff is doing. They believe in the other running backs they have, so they're not going to force the issue. So maybe he's back in week 11 against the Cardinals. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's back in week 12 in Washington. Maybe he's not. At this point, nobody knows. If he's not back to Washington game, though, he would revert back to injured reserve, and he's done for the season. So he's going to have to make the progress necessary to play in the next 2 weeks because there's a 21-day window when a player is designated to return from injured reserve that the team has to work with. And once that 21 days is up, again, the player reverts to IR, and then you can't bring him back for the rest of the season. So if he's not ready by the Washington game, they'll either have to add him to the roster and then just make him an inactive scratch until he's ready, or he's going to be done for the season. So there is a timeline there. The clock is ticking, but they're hoping they can get him back for the Cardinals game or the Washington game in the future. Carroll made it sound like that was possible, but again, this is an injury that nobody really knows what's going to happen here, and it's still possible that we might not see Chris Carson play again this season. We might see him play next week. That's just the little that we know about this particular injury and just the nature of it. Again, a neck injury isn't something to scoff about regardless of the severity. It's a neck injury. So the Seahawks are doing what they need to do. They're doing the right thing. They're being careful with him and making sure that he's 100% ready to play. In other injury news, the Seahawks will also be without linebacker Cody Barton this weekend. He's been dealing with a quad injury, did not practice at all. Pete Carroll didn't seem to think this was going to be a long-term issue. No injured reserve for him at this point, but they're going to be evaluating him next week, see where he's at. And depending on the progress he's made, it's not out of the question that he could end up on injured reserve at some point. But right now, they're going week to week. He's not going to be playing this game. So the Seahawks going to be a little light at linebacker. Probably will bring Tanner Muse up as a practice squad elevation for the second consecutive game to try to help with depth at that position. Nick Bellore can also play linebacker. Started some games for the 49ers back in the day. Capable player at that position. So they feel they can get by without Barton, but that's a significant loss on special teams. Cornerback Bless Austin's also not going to make the trip to Green Bay. He's dealing with a personal matter, did not practice this week, so he won't be playing in this game. And Al Woods is listed as questionable. He's also dealing with a personal matter, but he did make the trip to Green Bay, unlike Austin. And Pete Carroll made it sound yesterday like it was a pretty good chance that he was going to play in this game. Whatever he's got going on, sounds like he's going to be able to play against the Packers. So overall, coming out of a bye, the Seahawks feeling pretty good about the health of their roster. They're not going to have Chris Carson back yet, but they got Russell Wilson back, D. Eskridge. Sounds like Al Woods is going to play. Alex Collins, DK Metcalf were not on the final injury report, so they're good to go. Seahawks are going to be very close to full strength going up against the Packers as they try to break a 9-game losing streak at Lambeau Field. When I come back in the second quarter, what is it going to take for the Seahawks to snap that long losing streak? It's time for my weekly keys to victory on both sides of the football. You won't want to miss it. You're listening to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Seahawks is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect. Win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team or the away team can come to recharge. It's the place you always look forward to stopping at on a long road trip to rest your legs and refuel. I remember my mother always took me to McDonald's before school every Wednesday for a couple cinnamon rolls and a milk. A lot of the time I told her I would have a test that day, and sometimes it was true, sometimes it was not, but it was one of my favorite parts of the entire week, and I was always looking forward to it. So head to your local McDonald's to refuel and reconnect. Did somebody say Locked On Seahawks watch party? McDonald's, I'm loving it. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, Saturday edition. Wasn't able to have a Blue Friday show this week due to a crazy schedule yesterday, but going to be covering the same bases that I always cover on Friday. Got a big game coming up tomorrow between the Seahawks and the Packers at Lambeau Field. And this has really been a house of horrors for the Seahawks. They have not won at Lambeau since 1999. Mentioned this earlier in the week. That was Mike Holmgren's first season on the sidelines for the Seahawks. His first time back at Lambeau that they won. Ever since then, they've lost 9 straight games. A lot of them have not been close. They've lost 3 playoff games at Lambeau Field, including 1 in the Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson era. It's just been a struggle for them. So let's talk keys to victory. How can they end that streak and get to 4-5, maybe be in a position where they're battling for that 7th wild card with a losing record? That's the state of the NFC right now. Certainly is possible that that could happen. Let's talk keys to victory on offense. To me, there's one key that stands above the rest. You look at the last 4 times the Seahawks have played at Lambeau Field, including that 2019 divisional round. They have scored 3 points in the first half in all 4 of those games. They have never scored a touchdown. They've never scored 2 field goals. The offense has been atrocious in the first half of games at Lambeau Field in the Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll era. They have not been able to put points on the board, and they've tried to come back in the second half. They have found their groove in the 3rd and 4th quarter, but it's always been too little, too late, including that playoff game. They were down 21-3, and it was 28-23 in the 4th quarter, and the Seahawks had the ball approaching midfield. They had a chance to win that game. Were not able to get the job done, though, simply because they didn't do enough in the first 2 quarters. So they got to find a way to get off to a fast start, and this is a particularly important key just from the fact that Russell Wilson is in his first game back from injury. You want to give him some easy completions to get him back in the game, get him into a groove. I don't think it's going to be a big issue for him to shake off rust because this is Russell Wilson we're talking about, but he's never had to come back from injury. This is the first time he missed games his entire career, so this is new territory for him. Shane Waldron's got to be able to help him out a little bit and get him some easy completions, mix in the run game. If they can do that, this is a Packers defense that ranks 6th right now in scoring, but they have had a few games where they have given up some points. They have some vulnerabilities. They've got some injuries on that side of the ball. So I believe that is the most crucial key. If the Seahawks come out flat offensively and they're not able to put many points on the board in the first half, I don't like their chances of winning this game. They've got to be able to get in the end zone at least once. If they can get a touchdown and a few field goals even, that's going to look like an offensive explosion compared to the last 4 games that they've had at Lambeau. So I think that's going to be crucial. You've got to get Russell Wilson some easy throws early, get him back rolling, and then maybe you can get some deep shots. That leads into my second point here, though. You can't be looking for those deep balls early and often. Those big plays are not going to be there often against this Packers defense. There's a couple reasons for that. Their corners are better than advertised. They do have injuries there. If Eric Stokes isn't playing, they're already without Jair Alexander, their best corner. So certainly they have the corners out there as backups that maybe you can take advantage of with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. They got a very good front 7 that can get pressure on the quarterback. And Rashawn Gary's got over 40 pressures this year. Kenny Clark, if he plays in this game, he's questionable. He's got over 30. So they've got a couple guys that know how to turn up the heat on quarterbacks. Is Russell Wilson going to have the time to be able to take those shots? And so they're going to have to allow those deep balls to come to them, especially because this is a defense that has played a lot of quarters coverage this year. Joe Barry, their defensive coordinator, using a lot of the same stuff that he was able to see Brandon Staley run with the Rams last year. He was on the Rams staff, and he was a defensive coordinator before then and ran more of a cover 3 heavy defense. But they run a lot of 2 deep safety looks, a lot of quarter coverage to try to take away those explosives. And that's been something that's been a kryptonite for the Seahawks. Are they going to be able to get that quick passing game going That is going to be crucial. Can they get a few screens? That is something they've not been able to do all year. Maybe D. Eskridge, you can get the ball too quick and he can do some damage on a couple of screens. Running back screens would be nice. Something to use the aggressiveness of that front line against them. The quick passing game, allow Russell Wilson to get the ball out, not expose him to a bunch of hits. I think if you can do that and you can run the ball a little bit, that is going to create opportunities for those shot plays because you've got the receiver talent advantage against the Packers corners, especially if Stokes doesn't play in this game. But you can't just go out thinking those shot plays are going to be there right away. That is probably not going to happen. This is a defense that's been really good at limiting those plays. They're right now ranked near the bottom of the NFL in terms of 20-plus yard receptions. They've given up the 7th fewest in the league. So they don't give up a lot of chunk plays on defense in passing situations. The Seahawks, of course, are one of the most explosive. So it's one of those cases something's got to give, but they have to be patient to let those opportunities arise. And I think that the last thing here, I've mentioned the run game a few times. You look at what the forecast is going to look like this weekend. Right now, they're calling for temperatures in the mid-30s. There's a chance of snow during the game. Of course, it's mid-November in Green Bay. There's always a chance that it's going to be snowing. So the weather is going to be set up where it might not be favorable to throw the football a bunch. And this has been a stadium that Russell Wilson's really struggled. He had a 4-interception game back in 2016. The Seahawks fell way behind in that one. And a number of those picks were not his fault. But this can be a really tough stadium for road quarterbacks to come in and throw the football. This has been a Jekyll and Hyde run game for the Seahawks. They've had their games. They've looked great, like in Pittsburgh. They played well running the football against Minnesota early, then got away from it because they fell behind. There have been games like the New Orleans game where they have not been able to get anything going on the ground, and they kept trying to establish it, and it wasn't there. You're going to have to hope that Jekyll is the one that shows up in this game because they're going to need to be able to run the ball against this Packers defense. If you allow that front line to be able to pin their ears back and you're in a situation where you fall behind and you're trying to throw the ball almost every play, they are going to eat up Russell Wilson. This is too talented of a defense. There needs to be balance. You can't be one-dimensional. So I'm not saying they need to run for 200 yards, but they need to be effective enough on the ground that they're not one-dimensional. And there have been games this year they have not been able to do that. It's been on the line. It's been on the running backs. They share the blame. But both those units need to play at their best in this game to give the Seahawks balance, especially with this being Russell Wilson's first game back. Take a little bit of that weight off his shoulders. And if they can do that, as good as this Packers defense is, again, this is a defense that can give up points. They have vulnerabilities. If you're balanced and you're able to get both the run and pass game going, Russell Wilson's upright. You have weapons on the outside that are going to be a problem for them as the game goes on. I feel like that gives the Seahawks a chance to be able to win this football game. Now, on defense, the Seahawks have been playing pretty well on defense the last 3 games, but this will be the best quarterback that they've played, hands down, in over a month. Aaron Rodgers expected to play, activated today from the COVID-19 list, was back at the team facility. So even though he didn't practice this week, it's Aaron Rodgers. He is going to be starting. He's going to be playing in this game. The biggest key, and you can say this about all quarterbacks, but especially when you look at Aaron Rodgers' numbers this year, he has been a pedestrian quarterback when he's been pressured this year. 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. That's been his numbers. 4.4 yards per attempt when he's been pressured this year. He has looked very human when teams have been able to get pressure on him. And obviously he's an expert at extending plays, improvising. So you've got to be able to finish when you pressure him as well. But that is going to be the biggest key for Seattle. Can their front line consistently get pressure on Aaron Rodgers? Are you going to be able to mix in some timely blitzes? I think Jamal Adams needs to be used some of this game to get after him a little bit. Maybe Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks, who have been very efficient with their blitz opportunities this year. You can't get too blitz happy against Aaron Rodgers, but sprinkle a few of those in and hope your front line gets the job done. A lot of 4-man rushes. If they're able to do that, it gives them a much better chance to win this football game, especially with the fact Rodgers didn't have normal preparation this week. I don't think that's going to impact him very much because of who he is. It's Aaron Rodgers. He's played a long time. He knows what he's doing. But still, he didn't practice this week. That's still a big deal. I think you can get some pressure on him. Really gives you a chance to win this football game. And then on the outside, Davante Adams absolutely killed the Seahawks in the playoffs a couple years ago. Trey Flowers was going up against him. Trey Flowers is no longer on the Seahawks roster. They're going to be going with DJ Reed, Trey Brown, and Sidney Jones. That trio has got to be able to somewhat neutralize him. He's going to make his plays. Davante Adams is going to have some big plays in this game. That's going to happen. But the Seahawks need to force another receiver not named Davante Adams or Aaron Jones, their standout running back. They need to force somebody not named Adams or Jones to beat them in this game. Randall Cobb is still a solid receiver, but he's now towards the tail end of his career. Allen Lazard is a solid player, not a star by any means. A.J. Dillon, their other running back, can catch the football better than most people realize, but that's not a huge strength in his game. So if you're letting those players be the ones that are getting the football most of the time, that really puts you in a prime position to win this game. Green Bay can still score. They can still get first downs with some of their complementary weapons. But you can't let Adams and Jones take over this game. And that's what they did in that playoff game 2 years ago. Those two really were the offense for the Green Bay Packers. If the Seahawks can find a way to limit their production bit and try to force the other players on the roster to make the big plays, yeah, teams have been able to do that this year against them. Teams have had success throwing the football to second, third, fourth options. But the Seahawks have made strides in recent weeks. I feel like that gives them the best chance to be able to just win this game. If they're getting pressure and if they're able to neutralize those two main pass catchers in Green Bay's offense, Adams and Jones, then that dramatically improves their chances of winning this football game. And I'm going to put this one, maybe this will become a weekly one for me, but it seems especially important this week. Everyone knows the Seahawks have struggled defending screens this year. It's been a real problem for them all season long. I do feel like we have seen them make a few more plays against screens as of late, especially since the Saints game. I thought in the Jaguars game, they did a pretty good job working against those screens. Green Bay loves running screens, though. Aaron Rodgers, according to Pro Football Focus, has completed the second most passes on screens this year in the NFL. That's not abnormal. They've been doing that a lot, especially since Matt LaFleur came a few years ago as the new head coach. They will run a lot of screens. They'll run a lot of RPOs. So it's going to come down to the Seahawks being able to tackle and not allowing big chunk plays against screens. Can they sniff those out? They need to be on red alert. I'm looking at the D-line. You got to feel the presence of the offensive line letting you through too easy, and you got to be able to slow yourself down and stay put. Don't get too deep in the backfield. Otherwise, you're playing right into what the Packers want to do. They'll run bubble screens. They'll run tight end screens. So the Seahawks need to be on red alert for those type of plays in this game. If they're not able to do that, the Packers can beat you with screens. That's how good they are at running them. So that's going to be crucial in this game for the Seahawks. They got to find a way to slow those down, especially the ones that go to Jones and Adams. Again, two best pass catchers they've got on this team. They're really good on screen plays, too. You've got to be able to slow them down and get to the football quickly once they have the catch. Don't let them get big chunk plays off those screens. And last but not least, create some turnovers. I know that that's a very cliche one, but this is a secondary that has not created many turnovers this year. Quandre Diggs has 3 interceptions. He has been the exception to the rule. He has been fantastic all season, but none of Seattle's corners have an interception. None of Seattle's linebackers have an interception. I mean, Diggs is the only player on the roster that has a pick, and Aaron Rodgers is a very tough quarterback to intercept. He did throw 2 in the season opener against the Saints. They got blown out in that game. A lot of questions about the Packers. They've only won 7 of their last 8, though, since that game. They really righted the ship. Rodgers historically does not throw a lot of picks. Can the Seahawks coax him into a bad decision or make a nice play to get a pick in this game? Maybe somebody like DJ Reed or Trey Brown gets his first interception. Maybe Bobby Wagner picks him off. He's way overdue for an interception. Regardless who it is, Seattle needs to find a way to create turnovers. They have lost the turnover battle each of the last 4 times they played the Packers at Lambeau Field. Can you find a way to reverse that trend, at least draw even? That gives the Seahawks a much better chance to win this football game. When I come back in the third quarter, I'm going to dish out my picks to click for this week. And last but not least, my final prediction. Will the Seahawks go into Lambeau and get their first win since 1999? Or will Aaron Rodgers and the Packers prove to be too much and extend their winning streak against the Seahawks at home to 10 games? Continue listening to find out. You're listening to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey, Seahawks fans, this is Corbin Smith with an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about. It's called Get Upside. My listeners are making up to 25 cents for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. Use the promo code Touchdown and get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first fill up. That's up to 50 cents cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app for free and use the promo code Touchdown to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 a month in cash back, and there's no catch. The cash back gets added right to your account. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use the promo code Touchdown to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, Saturday edition. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Got a big game coming up at Lambeau Field tomorrow. Seahawks coming out of their bye. Russell Wilson back in action. They're looking to climb back into the playoff race despite being just 3-5. They're only a game out of that final wildcard spot in the NFC. So this is a big game for them to have an opportunity to not only break a 9-game losing streak spanning back to 2003 at Lambeau Field, but also to get closer to 500 and position themselves for a playoff run in the second half. There's really very little margin for error at this point for the Seahawks. So let's look at picks to click this week. Which players do I believe are primed for a big game for the Seahawks? I'm going to start on the offensive side of the football. I considered a couple different candidates for this one, but I'm going to go with the old reliable, number 14, DK Metcalf. I just like the matchups on the outside. Eric Stokes, their rookie, their first-round pick out of Georgia, is questionable to play this week because of a knee injury. Even if he plays in this game, I like the matchups on the outside, but let's just assume he doesn't play for right now. Kevin King is going to be starting, former Washington standout, had a pretty good start last week against the Chiefs. He's got the size to be able to match up against DK Metcalf, but I just question the athleticism there. I think DK Metcalf has a major advantage in that category. King has struggled against receivers like him in the past, so I think DK Metcalf is poised for a big game. Rasul Douglas would be the other corner if Stokes doesn't play. That's a matchup that DK Metcalf should win too if he's going up against Douglas. So I think this is a big game for him. I think he goes for over 100 yards for the second time this season now that Russell's back under center. And I don't think that's going to come from a bunch of deep shots either. I think if the Seahawks are smart, they're getting DK Metcalf the football on slants, on dig routes, on crossers, even screens. Just get the football into DK Metcalf's hands and let him go to work. I think he's got a big game coming up at Lambeau. And he's only played there once. His rookie year, that playoff game. Made some big plays in that game. I think he is overdue, though, for a 100-plus yard performance, and I just like the matchups that he's got on the outside. So I think he's going to go for 7 receptions, 124 yards, and a touchdown for the Seahawks in this game. I just like the chances of him having a big game against the corners that the Packers have and winning some battles in the short to intermediate game, maybe having a play or two downfield as well as the game progresses. But I think he's due for a big game with Russell Wilson back under center. On the defensive side of the football, I had a couple candidates that came to mind, but I mentioned this as my number one key to victory for the Seahawks. You've got to get pressure on Aaron Rodgers, and I think that starts with Darrell Taylor. You look back at his first half. He had 4 sacks, the most on the team. He let a number of sacks get out of his grasp, too. He's consistently been in the backfield, finding ways to get to the quarterback. The Jacksonville game before the bye, he was coming off a neck injury. Didn't look like he was fully there yet in terms of the fact that he had not played in 2 weeks. I think his neck was healed, but he just didn't look like he was fully 100% back all the way. And he was so close to getting 3 or 4 sacks on Trevor Lawrence. He was back there constantly. I think he's going to start turning some of those pressures into sacks this week. I like his matchups, even though Jenkins replacing David Bakhtiari at left tackle has been good. He's only given up 2 sacks and 10 pressures this year, according to Pro Football Focus. He has been a guard and a center by trade in the past. I still think from an athleticism standpoint, Darrell Taylor has an advantage there and can beat Jenkins. And I like his matchup with Billy Turner if he plays on the other side. Billy Turner, their right tackle, has been respectable, but he's given up 23 pressures and 3 sacks. He is beatable off the edge. So I think Darrell Taylor is the X factor here for the Seahawks. Can he get to Aaron Rodgers? And most importantly, can you bring him down? That's been his biggest issue. He's let a number of sacks get away from him this year. He's been so close. Hasn't been able to bend around the corner quite quick enough to get to the QB. This is maybe the game that he's able to put it together. You got to hope it is, because if he's able to provide consistent pressure, he is the one edge rusher the Seahawks have that has that motor and that explosiveness. Really, the explosiveness is what sets him apart from everybody else. The ability to get upfield as a speed rusher and bend around the corner. If he's able to do that against the Packers tackles and he can get into the backfield and get after Aaron Rodgers, at least get some hits on the quarterback while he's throwing, you got to like Seattle's chances a lot more. And I just think he's going to get it done. I like the matchups against the tackles. So I think Darrell Taylor is going to have a multi-sack game. I think he gets to Aaron Rodgers twice and gets three quarterback hits. So 2 sacks, 3 quarterback hits for Darrell Taylor. I think a big game coming up for him, and maybe the rest of the pass rush feeds off of it as well. They certainly could use that going into this game against one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. As far as predictions go, I've been torn on this one. Normally we do this on our crossover show, and Peter and I decided, you know what? Let's do our predictions on our last show of the week. Everything is pointing towards the Packers winning this game with Aaron Rodgers coming back. They lost last week. They're going to be motivated. They want to stay in the hunt for the number 1 seed. They've dominated the Seahawks at Lambeau Field for 2 decades. That's why I'm picking the Seahawks to win this game. I just think Russell Wilson coming back from injury, there was a different vibe in that building this week, and it was universal. I mean, you can just see it was just a different energy. They're excited coming out of the bye week. They've got their star quarterback back. They've got D. Eskridge back. Chris Carson might be back soon. They're getting healthier. The defense has been playing much better. They believe that they can continue doing that going against a much better offense in Green Bay. So I'm putting a lot of faith in that defense. They're going to be able to do this, but I've got the Seahawks winning this one 27-23. I think Russell Wilson has a slightly better game than Aaron Rodgers. Coming back from injury, Rodgers coming back from the COVID-19 list. I think Wilson outduels him. I think both players will have solid games, but I think Wilson outduels him. I think Alex Collins gets 80 rushing yards. Not a fantastic game by any means, but they're going to be able to run the ball enough that they can have some balance and they're not one-dimensional. I mentioned the big game for DK Metcalf. I think Darrell Taylor, Carlos Dunlap's going to get his first full sack of the season this game. I think they're going to be able to get to Aaron Rodgers a bit in this one. I like the matchups on the outside, sprinkle in those blitzes. I don't know that they create a turnover because Aaron Rodgers is so darn difficult to intercept, but this is a game that I think the defense is going to find ways to limit Green Bay to some field goals. Seattle's going to be able to finish a few more drives. So I have them winning by 4 points and ending that 9-game losing streak at Lambeau Field, getting their first win there since 1999. I expect it's going to be like every other Packers-Seahawks game we've watched since 2012. It's going to be a back-and-forth affair, going to be very close. There's going to be some wacky things that happen. So wacky that I can't even predict what it's going to be because we saw that onside kick recovery in the 2014 NFC Championship game. We saw the play where Malik Turner dropped a pass on the final drive for the Seahawks. Looked like they had a chance to win that game in the playoffs a few years ago. There's just always wacky plays that happen when these two teams get together. So I'm looking forward to it. Fans should be looking forward to it. It's obviously going to be stressful watching it play out, but I do think the Seahawks stay in the win column, extend their win streak to 2 games, and get 1 game closer to 500 and getting back into the playoff hunt. It's going to be a barn burner. Looking forward to it. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to check out Locked On Seahawks on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and the all-new Odyssey app. That's AUDACY. When I return on Monday, I'll be joined by Rob Rang. 2 of us will hopefully be breaking down a Seahawks victory at Lambeau Field. Regardless, we'll be sharing some insights, some takeaways from Sunday's game, and as always, answering your mailbag questions in our Monday mailbag. Thanks for listening in. Enjoy the game. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Go Hawks.